Burlesque Stripped Down, episode number 56. Welcome back, my friends. This is Velvet Eau Claire. As always, I am your guide to all of the secrets, the saucy secrets, sexy secrets, and more often than not, some of the not-so-sexy secrets of us, the ladies, gents, and non-binary folk behind the tassels. Thank you so much for pressing play today. I have a very, very exciting episode. Just to give you a little recap, we are actually finished up with the Season O sex. Next week we'll be doing a recap episode with some announcements and some of my favorite takeaways from the Season O sex here on Burlesque Stripped Down. But I wanted to make sure, I wanted to get this particular episode out first, even though it's not technically part of the Season O sex, but really, I mean, the whole burlesque life is the Season O sex, is it not? So I wanted to make sure we got this out because I have a very, very exciting and very timely episode for you today. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. For now, don't forget, if you are loving the show, there's a couple things you can do. First of all, you can share it out there to all of your friends and your buddies and your colleagues and your students and your teachers and everybody. The more ears we get in front of, the more guests I can bring on, the more, the more we can do, the more community we can create here. And I think that's my end goal. Those of you who know me, you know that is my end goal, is to create a supportive and loving and honest community to help us with our art and with our passions. So please spread the word, easily done on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, real life, any of those things. Just spread the word about the show. If you'd like to support in a kind of more tangible way, I would love to have you on board if you are interested in helping with the show on any level, even if it's just from doing a little bit more like active sharing or to, audio editing or creating, whatever it is that kind of floats your boat. I'm creating a team. We've got a couple people. I'll actually be introducing you to them all next week. And we're creating a little BSD posse. So if you're interested in being a part of that, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email me directly if you like, velvet@burlesquestrippeddown.com, or you can go to, I have a little form page set up so I can get to know you a little bit better. And that's at burlesquestrippeddown.com/join the posse, POSSE. So you can do that and just kind of let me know what you're interested in. It's not a commitment or anything like that, but if you'd like to help out, hey, I'd love to have you. If you'd like to support financially so that we can kind of, continue making improvements on the technology, on the time that we spend, all of these things, I do have a Patreon page set up, and that is burlesquestrippeddown.com/support. That'll take you to our Patreon page where you can donate as little as $1 or a couple bucks a month, anywhere up to, if you want to be my best friend and donate $20, $25 a month, I would not turn it down. But we've got some perks set up. I would also love to hear what kind of perks that you would like to see on that page as well, because I am more than willing to kind of branch out and do some new things with that. So spreading the word, of course, if you use iTunes or another podcast player, subscribing in that will make it easiest for you to receive the new episodes directly onto your device, and it helps us show up higher in the algorithm. So it's kind of a win-win-win for everybody involved. So those are kind of my 4 big things, right? So share, subscribe, I forgot already. Oh yeah, join the team and support on Patreon. Whichever of those you can do, you would like to do, I would be immensely grateful to you, sirs, madams, and non-binary friends of mine. All right, so let me tell you a little bit what we got going on today. In case you didn't know, we got burlesque all over the place. And it turns out that over the last 8 years, a group of burlesquers and filmmakers over in Portland, Oregon, and I think there's been some others scattered in that general area, but they've been working on a film for us. They've been working on this great documentary called Burlesque Heart of the Glitter Tribe. And this documentary, I got to see a screener copy ahead of time, and it struck a chord with me. I thought it was a really nice representation. It doesn't have the chance, we talk about this in the upcoming interview, it doesn't have a chance to go too deeply into a lot of the details, but it's a great kind of a primer. A lot of us that do burlesque, we can see ourselves in it, we can relate to it, all of that. And then people who are new to burlesque, I have a good friend that I watched it with recently when I watched the screener, And it was a great kind of introduction for her as far as what burlesque really is, even though we can't really define it and we'll keep you questioning, but it's a nice little primer that way. So this documentary is fabulous. And I was lucky enough to get a chance to sit down over Skype with the director and producer, John Manning, as well as one of the featured stars and one of the producers, Zora Von Pavonine. And the three of us got on Skype together and we chatted, and it was really fascinating, especially for me because I am someone who I almost went into filmmaking and things like that. So from that perspective, I thought it was fascinating. So we get into a lot of the nitty gritties. I mean, everything, one of the big things I love, one of my favorite topics that we get into is about representation and diversity, both on stage in shows and in this documentary and on the screen. And we talk about some of the dilemmas with that and some of the issues and the problems, the difficulties surrounding that. So that's a great conversation. I love what Zora has to say about what burlesque is. I think she has one of the most beautiful definitions. Kind of blew my mind. Like even when I was back listening, when I was editing it, I was like, holy shit, like that is something. So you're definitely going to want to listen in for that. Of course, we're also going to tell you where you can see the film. It does have a week-long run that's coming up in 2 special cities in the United States, and hopefully it will be shown again. It's had a few nights in various cities around the country, but hopefully it will be shown again. And you can also find it online starting on March 7th. So I'm going to let John explain all of that as we get into the interview, but I will be back right after this interview to kind of fill in some of the gaps. But before I launch into the interview, let me give you a little rundown about these 2 fabulous human beings, okay? So John Manning has been an internationally recognized, award-winning filmmaker for the past 32 years. From national commercials for the world's largest corporations to theatrical documentaries such as Lord Save Us from Your Followers and psychological thrillers such as House of the Last Things, he brings 3 decades of film experience to the creation of Burlesque Heart of the Glitter Tribe. And then there's Zora. You want to know a little bit about Zora? Well, as a published poet, holder of a handful of intellectual property patents, and a few degrees in the creative arts. I love how she just says it like, yeah, just a few degrees, NBD, whatever. So Zora needles on towards creating smart, impassioned acts wrapped in costumes that speak to her tremendous love of fashion and design, reflective of her hip-hop roots and the unmistakable dedication of a distance runner. It has been said that her sparkle can be seen from outer space. It has been rumored that one night in Zora's audience will have you discovering confetti in all your places for a month on. With pasties so small, even the most veteran of showgoers blush. They come to see the tease and leave with an eye full of feathers. She is the girl with the peacock tattoo. These 2 are a phenomenal duo to get to talk to. I would love to actually chat more with some of the other people that worked on and were featured in the film. And so maybe in the future we'll get a chance to do that. But for now, listen in. I would love to hear, I'll mention this again at the end, but I'd love to hear some of the feedback because we really kind of dig in to a lot of the details surrounding both filmmaking and burlesque in general. So without further ado, let's go ahead and launch into my interview with 2 of the key members of the film Burlesque Heart of the Glitter Tribe. Yes, that's right, my friends. I am so excited to be joined today by 2 of the main players in an upcoming film. I have John Manning and Zora Von Pavonine here today, and I am so excited to get to talk to you about your lives, the depths of your souls, as well as the upcoming movie. So why don't you just say hello? I mean, I read your bios a little bit, but why don't you just say hi to everybody and kind of fill in all the gaps? Zora, would you like to start?
Yeah, great. Hi, good morning, and thank you so much for having us here today. It's great to be on the line with you. Thanks for having us.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad to chat with you.
Yes, Velvet, this is John Manning, and I am ecstatic to be here and curious about Stripped Down and what we're going to talk about, and let's go for it.
Yes, I love it. Absolutely. Well, as a lot of the listeners know, if you're just joining us, welcome. If you're a new listener, I so appreciate you pressing play today. We just like to kind of get to know. I mean, Burlesque Stripped Down is really, I picked the title for a very specific reason because, burlesque can be very, very beautiful and glamorous and all of these lovely glitter and rhinestones and wonderfulness. But I think that it's important to get to know the reality, the real performers, the ladies, gents, and as I always say, non-binary folk behind the tassels. So again, we know a little bit about you. First of all, let's get a little intro. Tell me about this newfangled film thing that we have going on.
Well, I'll start. I'm the filmmaker, director, and one of the producers. This project started about 7 years ago, and we started, going to many, many shows on the West Coast. And the more we saw, the more we liked what we saw in Portland, Oregon. And we continued to go to shows and started to interview people. And Zora was one of the very first rock stars of the stage that jumped out at us, and she also became a producer on the show and what I would call a conduit to other people and other ideas, and helped us look at and think about burlesque and what was going on in kind of an inside way. So we shot, like I said, for several years up until about a year ago. We took a year to edit this film, and it came out to the world gently last summer and was picked up for international distribution at that time by Accelerator Media. And as of this week, we have a premiere set in Los Angeles for a week and Portland for a week starting March 3rd and March 4th. And we have opened in 25 cities around the country. So we're very excited. And
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, thank you for that little intro. So for anybody who is interested, obviously we have a lot of burlesque performers that listen. We also have a lot of burlesque enthusiasts and what we like to call burlesque adjacent people. Yes. And I think that this film is just, I got to see it, and it's just such a great all-around kind of introduction, and yet also a deep dive at the same time into the burlesque community. And we'll kind of get into some more of the details on that. So for everybody listening, obviously in the intro, we talked about it a little bit, but the title of the film is Burlesque Heart of the Glitter Tribe. And as you mentioned, it's going to be released in, or have a longer run in LA and in Portland. Do you have plans to send it elsewhere? Obviously, like you said, it's had like one night releases in other cities around the country. What's kind of the future plan for it?
Well, also it is available on iTunes and Amazon as of March 7th. What happens after that is to be determined. There are many cities that are reaching out that did not, were not on the list of the initial 25. So there may be a second wave of a theatrical release. And if that happens, fabulous. If not, we would hopefully end up on Netflix. So, so that's where it is now.
Fabulous. Oh, good. Okay. So you're going to get a little bit more into this, but I love that you mentioned that it was such a long endeavor. I guess I didn't realize that when I was watching. So you did filming over 7 years. Yes. A crazy amount of time, in a good way. Like that's just a lot. I can only imagine how much there was then to sift through and spend that year editing. But Zora, how about you? I mean, when you were first approached by John, what was kind of what was the thought process as far as being a part of this film?
I think at the onset, it was just a really a beautiful concept and a very exciting idea. And there was definitely some foundation work that I know that John had done that he sort of had brewing in the back of his mind that wasn't necessarily needing to be made available to those of us who are kind of on the peripheral at that point of participating. So from my perspective, I would say it was kind of just this sparkle, like, oh yeah, obviously, like, why wouldn't we bring some cameras and film a burlesque show? Like, of course, like, let's do it. But as we know, it evolved into something so much grander, and something that has kind of resulted that it's greater than the sum of its parts. And the way that this has knit together over the years with interviews from our sort of soft conceptual ideas about what we wanted the documentary to be about, and then that really graceful moments, plural actually, of interviewing people and realizing there was something much richer than we had originally imagined, and kind of giving the reins over to the idea itself, and then just kind of letting it lead us. So at the beginning, I would say that nobody really had any idea, what it was going to become or where it was going to go. And our availability to be open to that and to be vulnerable to that unknowing, I think, is a really huge strength of the documentary, because we really sort of let the people who we brought into the film and their experiences lead the content. And because of that, we've sort of arrived with, with this, beautiful gem of a documentary, and sort of in this place where these stories have sort of been rounded out for this particular time stamp. It's a documentary can be a bit arbitrary in terms of timeline. It's a snapshot of what was going on right then. So again, it's hard to say, at the onslaught. I don't even remember what I thought it was going to be at the beginning. It's I have no idea.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, let's set up some cameras and some lights. You just think that it might be a little, I don't want to say flash in the pan, but you accept that it's something that's happening in that moment without really being able to take heed that it's going to have a life longer than that moment. And I think for me, that maybe has been the biggest thing at the end of all this, is that, wow, this is going to live on so much longer than just, the moments that we were all in front of the camera.
John, how did your kind of approach to it? Because I think there was probably some conceptual things in the beginning. And did that change over time? Or how did your approach to this film kind of evolve?
Well, it changed tremendously over time. Like Zora was saying, when my wife, Julie Livingston, is one of the producers, and she's also a writer and filmmaker. And we have been making all kinds of different films for the last 20 years. And she kind of opened up this world to my eyes. She had some friends, including Zora, that were putting on a burlesque show. This was 7 or 8 years ago. And she invited me to go. And I was really blown away by how much fun everybody was having, the people in the audience being so much a part of it. A lot of burlesque shows, for people that haven't been, are very active. There's a lot of encouragement to have a good loop of feedback with the people on the stage. And so just being in that room and then starting to figure out, oh my goodness, there's all of this pop music and beautiful people and different colors of people and different sizes of people and all genders. And you're kind of like, oh wow, this is kind of blowing my mind, and it just seems so cool. I didn't really know enough to ask any of the right questions early on. I kind of thought, well, the biggest question is, I don't know, how is it not stripping? And you realize once you kind of fall into the subculture, while that's a question that other people have, I guess, to a certain degree, there are many, many other things that are important to these people that are fascinating. Documentaries are a little bit of an unusual animal, especially if you're going to, as the storyteller, go into, in this case, a subculture or an area that you don't know hardly anything about. You can do your research, and I, did read and watch films about past waves of burlesque all the way back to Victorian times, and it has been very different than the wave that is there now, or that we're in now. Just to briefly say, from the very beginning, I didn't want to make this about my journey. Many documentaries are about the filmmaker or the journalist's story of discovery, of going to Iraq and learning something, or going and adopting a baby, or going to China, and it's their journey, and through that you see China. Well, I didn't want to do that because I'm just not interested in making it about me. And so you realize once you get deeper and deeper into all of this that if I'm going to let these people tell their stories, I have to help be the audience and get those stories out of them. So I still have to be extremely present in making it an active conversation, but I have to make sure that when I put the film together that I don't need any words, any talking of my own to set up questions or, like I said, to make it about me. So this film does not have any voiceover in it from, let's call it, a disembodied voiceover character, or from the director, which, nobody really cares about. I wanted people to think about these people the whole time and let them tell their story. And I think that's what we have ended up with, and I think it's better for it.
Absolutely. And I think that was a beautiful choice that you made, because I definitely noticed that when I was watching as well, about how we do go on a journey of discovery through this film, but it's not guided. I mean, it is guided. It's not.
It's curated.
It's curated. I like that word. Very good. Yes, exactly. So you do go on that journey through the film, through the camera lens, so to speak. But I like that you make that decision to kind of keep yourself out of it, except for perhaps, as Zora said, as a curator. It works out very well. Well, and John, you kind of touched on this as well, because one of the things I really love about the film is all of the different issues that you're able to touch on in what is it, an hour and 15 minutes, hour and
That's
20
about
minutes,
right.
something
Yeah,
like
it's
that?
76 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, 76 minutes. I mean, I could not believe I was taking notes furiously because there were just so many things, including, as you mentioned, the difference between stripping and burlesque, which is something that we've talked about many times on this podcast. You've talked about, the evolution of being a performer. You talked about how the performers are like a family together, backstage and in life. You talked about nudity and sexuality and crafting and first aid. And I mean, all of these different things. It was just unbelievable, and yet it didn't feel rushed at all. So tell me a little bit, either Zora or John, about kind of almost like choosing what to include or knowing what to talk about when you were on camera, because burlesque is so nuanced and there are so many different elements. How did that kind of come about?
I guess I'll kind of answer one part of the question in brevity so that John can chime in too. I think it kind of probably circles back to my answer about sort of what we thought at the beginning of this. There are so many nuances. So I would say from my perspective, our job kind of became to attach to the elements that the people whose stories we were sharing with our viewing audience came through. The things that were important to them became the things that were important in the film, without, of course, making any grand sweeping statement of like, we're defining burlesque and we're defining whatever. No. We're just a vehicle to highlight the things that are important to this particular group of people. And I think that was a smart way to do it, because it's impossible. Like you said, I mean, there are as many nuances to burlesque as there are people performing them. I mean, we could spend 3 days talking about the subtleties of various parts of burlesque. And so focusing on the things that people said in their interview that we went, there it is, there's something, or things that started to get repeated of like, this is a through thread, this is a connective fiber of this texture of this movie, of this documentary. And that's somewhere that we can really put some more time and effort into exploring that. And so that would be the answer that I give from my perspective of how we picked. We sort of let our subjects pick for us.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's a saying in writing, and it's true in filmmaking as well, is that all good writing is really good editing. And so to be able to begin to edit your film, you have to have in a case like this, you have to have a massive amount of interviews and shows and all of these things. And in our case, we had interviews, not one word of which were used in the film. In some places, and it's not because those were bad interviews. It's just that actually it was early enough in the process that we didn't know as much, like I was saying earlier, about exactly what it was going to be, that as the film started to become focused, some of those interviews kind of didn't apply, or they didn't mesh in correctly. And to give you an idea of the quantity, we had over 500 pages of just transcripts. It requires a tremendous amount of reading also. And when you get to the editing point, in our case, there's a director and an editor and a producer, and that's separate from like Zora's input and things, which we used very much. But when we're sitting in the editing room and we're looking at various things, we have to kind of duke it out and say, no, this is important. No, that's important. No, this is more important. So that's why it takes so long. That's also why in filmmaking, I personally believe, as just part of my philosophy, that I am not interested in being an editor myself of my own material. I'm kind of old school in that I believe that you should bring in an outside editor who that is, first of all, what they do for their life. So every ounce of their being is about editing and how to present a story. And also, they are the first kind of outsider to look at the material. And when the filmmaker says, oh, this is my favorite part, or whatever, they look at it and they go, oh, I don't like what they just said, or it doesn't come through to me, or it's not funny, or it's not sexy, or whatever it is. So you start to, in a good way, you start the argument of editing. Editing is kind of a clash, kind of where good things come out of. And so our editor is a woman. Also, I specifically 100% wanted to make sure that this film wasn't somehow in a way that I wasn't even aware of, that it wasn't about the male gaze. I didn't want to do that. So that's why the other two producers, actually three producers, including Zora, all women, they helped me make every decision creatively, and from interview questions to everything. And the editor is a woman. Her name is Beth Siegel, and she did I think a fantastic job. And I had to, I had to stand up for everything and win the war of editing with her. And so we kind of, lock our time and our minds together, and we start kind of what the writers call breaking down the story. So there are many things that didn't make it in that we could have talked about, and we could have talked about any of those things longer. In a storytelling way, I kind of think, and my wife is a storyteller, and she has this strong belief, that what you're striving for in a story and in a film like this is to say whatever you're trying to say in a succinct way, and also show what you're trying to say. Show it, don't say it. So many of people have gotten to the end of the film and they look at me and they go, I just want more. Now I want to do burlesque, but now I have all these questions. That's not a bad critique about the film. That's actually how it should be. You should want more. This film isn't trying to be everything about burlesque.
Exactly. You just send them to my podcast then.
Exactly.
Yes, fuck yes.
I don't want to be verbose, but another thing about this is that I specifically decided early on I didn't want to make this film about the history of burlesque. If you're interested in that, there are many, or at least a handful, of good films out there about it. You can find out all about it, and they deserve their own film. Had I taken, a minute or two, or 5 or 10 minutes in the beginning of this story, get you up to speed with what it is, that's just not how I wanted to tell the story. I wanted to put you from the first frame, I wanted to put you backstage, and that's where it opens. And in a way, you're backstage the whole time, and on stage, and in the lives of these people. So I think it keeps it very current. It doesn't then wrap up all of this black and white footage and all of these legends, most of whom dance differently, and all of these things. It's all its own story. I just wanted to tell this story.
Yes, absolutely. I think that was a very important decision to make, because we do have other venues to find out the history, but this is one of the only, especially a well-produced look that I've seen of what modern day burlesque is really like. Like that it was a genuine, granted, everybody does things a little bit differently. And, as Zora mentioned, there's as many different, approaches to burlesque as there are people performing it. But I identified with the backstage antics that go on, and with every little bit, like, I'm like, yes, I've been there, and I have never seen that before. Especially, like I said, not in a well-produced package like this. So hats off to you for something amazing. Kind of going off of something that you said, now that the production is done, there were so many different, choices to be made throughout and things to be done. Now that it's all kind of wrapped up and finished, is there anything that you wish that you'd done a little differently? Again, whether behind the scenes, John, for you, or, Zora, things that you wish, you had said differently, or things that you had brought up, or anything like that?
Yeah, I am very eager to answer this question, because my interview was like 5 lifetimes ago at this point for me. And
yeah, I didn't realize it was 7 years. Or in that span.
I will say that I'm very grateful for the opportunity to answer this question, because I deeply appreciate the vulnerability that it brings up for me. There's parts of this like, oh, idiot, like, what were you thinking when you said that? Like, what in the actual fuck was in your brain? And in that moment, you just you accept the grace and the gift that you're being shown a snapshot of yourself, and with that, you get to reflect on how far you've come. There is so much that has changed for me personally, psychologically, physically, for burlesque, with the increase of conversation about the importance of burlesque. And again, that's a much larger context and a much larger topic, but social media has really done some beautiful things for burlesque, in that we are much closer knit in terms of topics and hotspots and other things that are relevant to people who choose to take their clothes off for entertainment. And so with that, I feel like I'm so much more connected into the fiber of what burlesque is. And a lot of that is because I get to sort of hive mind with other people who are doing the same thing and get my perspective expanded and evolved. So when I look back at the documentary at my first interview, none of that was happening at that time. I mean, there of course were people, and I'll speak nationally only, that were having these connective conversations, but it was in no way, shape, or form any kind of conversation that we're having now. Like it just wasn't. The technology wasn't there, frankly. So in looking back on it, I do have those wincing moments because it is such a snapshot. And of course, I've grown so much now. I mean, I celebrated my 10-year anniversary of burlesque in December.
Yay,
so thank you. Yay, burlesque! That's right. So I think for me, that kind of has been, said with so much love, of course, but it's been kind of the bummer part for me because it's like, oh my God, I'm so much smarter now. I know so much more. I could have spoken so much more intelligently. But again, as I mentioned earlier, it's like, this is just a snapshot. Like this is an arbitrary dropping of the pin in time about what was going on at that exact moment. And so to have like that grace and patience with myself, because of course I want to do my family proud. I want to do my industry proud. And so, again, some of the things that I said, I'm just like, oh man. But again, you just sort of take that breath and you're like, it's okay. Like when you know better, you do better. And even if I'm having that moment only with myself, I'm still having it. And that feels really good. But I think that's been a big part of my journey with this is you don't really have, like I said in the very beginning, that bigger picture, that sort of long game perspective. There's no way to ever have that until you've walked through the entire journey and can turn and reflect. Knowing now what I do and then reflecting back on that, just having that perspective of what we went through, of the things we said, of where we were as people during the time that we got interviewed compared to now. That is, I guess, one of the things that is interesting for me, because if you were to look or talk to me today versus the person that you meet in the documentary, there are similarities, but not the same at all. And so that has been an interesting part of this whole journey with myself in being on film and kind of watching all of that unfold, I guess, in the way that it has.
I find that fascinating. It is frustrating. I'm sure one of the things that practically every person that's featured in the documentary, and there are 12, practically every one of those people has said, I'm not even that person anymore. So it is true. And the nature of journalistic filmmaking or writing, where you're basically trying to tell someone else's story or some other group's story, you're locked, unless you're going to also tell the history, but you're locked into the present, So we don't know who we're going to become next year, and we don't know who we're going to become in 10 years. So as the person to decide to try and, write or make a film about something, I still have to dive in. You still have to say, well, there's no time like the present, and we're going to try and capture it now, even though all of us, including the filmmaker, will change in that time and in those 10 years. And I just think that's kind of interesting, and it is also frustrating, and it is true for the filmmakers as well. So, but to answer your questions, I have no regrets about making the film in any way. I don't have a regret about any of the people that we selected. I'm in love with every one of these people. Isaiah, I wish I could live with Isaiah. I really do. I have come to love these people in my own adjacent way. I guess maybe I'm part of the Glitter Tribe in Portland. So I have no regrets about any of that. The most difficult thing about making the film and then seeing the film that we have now at the end is the tremendous legal difficulty, the hurdles in getting music rights.
Oh, girl, you do not even know.
I know.
Oh, God.
So let me just take 2 minutes to talk about that to anybody. So when you go to any burlesque show, part of what is really cool is that, especially if it's a little bit more new wave and not as classic, you hear a lot of pop songs, and so you hear Jay-Z or you hear Pharrell or you hear Florence and the Machine and Prince and all this different stuff. That's part of what makes it super cool, because you already know the song. You're like, oh yeah, I love that. And so she does or he does something really unusual with it, and you remember it also because of the music.
And to quickly interject, like sometimes it's really clever. Like sometimes you're doing an act where the theme and the content is tied back to the song. So knowing what the song is,
no question about it.
It's everything.
Right, it's everything. everything, and there's irony to it or whatever else, or you're making a statement with what they said in the song and what you're doing with your body. So, of course, when we shot everybody, we recorded sound for everybody. So when we edited the whole film, initially, we had all of that sound in. So Michael Jackson and Prince and, like I said, whatever, Jay-Z or whatever. So we have all of these pop song clips. And the lawyers over the year of editing would only allow us 17 clips of pop songs, and each of those are, I believe, less than 20 seconds. So 15 or 20 seconds. So is Prince in there? Yes, Prince is in there. But
I was surprised by that. Yeah, I was, to be honest, when I heard it, because I'm a huge Prince fan. So when I heard that, I was like, really? You guys got the ability to play that?
There are pop songs in there. Now, I'm not talking about ones that we bought, which I'll talk about that in a second, but just the songs that went with the dancing. Ultimately, though, 17 might sound like a big number. It's not. There are about 200 cuts of music in the whole thing, and all of the rest, so let's call it 180 plus, all had to be replaced with new composed music.
Oh, and Velvet, it's such a bunch of bullshit.
Oh my gosh.
So I know. So part of what that does is, especially if you were there or if you're the artist, you're kind of like, oh, but she's doing her Michael Jackson routine.
Oh.
Or, oh, wait a minute, that was better when it was Florence and the Machine or whatever. So I have to give a shout out to Jim Walker, who was our composer, who honestly did a fantastic job to do what we call sound-alikes for most of the music. So when somebody like Sandria does a bossa nova piece for 2 minutes, we replace that whole 2 minutes with, first of all, the beats per minute are the same, so the movement of the dancer fits. But then we also replaced it with a custom composed bossa nova song. So it had the same basic sound, so the feel is there. And if you were there watching, you might have the same basic idea. But if Sandria listens to it, she looks at it and she goes, oh, well, that's not the so-and-so bossa nova song. So is it really tricky to replace those, but not have it then seem like canned music. So that's been a big frustration. You know, this is a learning curve in trying to use material that other artists use on stage. It becomes very, very problematic when you try and turn that into then a product that is not just a dance or a performance in the moment at the theater in town. Nobody gets busted for that. But if you make a film and it's in there forever, to get a distributor to touch it, they have to have clearance from your attorneys, and these have to be specific attorneys for music, what's called fair use rights. And so these people are extremely tight about allowing you to use any of it, because they're the ones that would then go to court for you if Sony decides to sue you. And so since there is so much music, it didn't make sense for us to try and push the legal limits or something. You have to go down the legal road. That's what happened to every piece of music that was associated to performers on stage. Additional to that, there was some music that we bought, and the one big cut that we bought was the Hoosier Take Me to Church track, you know, which opened the Grammys 2 years ago and stuff. I mean, it's obviously a huge, huge hit. And we did pay, let's call it full price, for that. And I happen to be extremely proud of that, because not just that as the director, that's what I chose, but Hoosier has since continued to not allow that song on any movie or any TV show.
Wow. And
to make it more difficult, looking for the rights, we had to get all of the rights from him before we then laid it on them that we wanted to have actually a woman cover the song that we had heard. And we wanted this specific cover of his song to be the one that we used, because it's not 100%, but it's mostly, I would say, a female story, our film. And I wanted a woman singing it. It made more sense to me as a woman singing it. And she sings it balls to the wall.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Her name is Morgan James. Follow her. She is freaking amazing. I cannot tell you, if you go to YouTube and you put in Morgan James, Take Me to Church, it will have a YouTube of her singing the song that the track that we used in the film with a piano, and the camera never cuts.
Oh.
She sang that in one take. I'm telling you, this woman is amazing. She travels all over the world and sings, but she's just an amazing, basically, cover artist that can take great music and somehow make it her own and still make you go, you are fucking unbelievably talented. So, we just thought, well, for the opening of the movie and then for what becomes the end credit sequence, which also has other scenes and stuff in it, we wanted to pay for a big piece of music, and that's the one we chose anyway. So that's kind of a music story.
Yeah, well, I think that was, it's a very moving piece, and it does, I love that you had it kind of re-recorded, or covered rather, because it just adds that. That song already is so haunting and yet sexy, and yet, I don't know, it just invokes all these emotions. And then to have it covered by someone with such, a different tone to her voice, and just, it was very powerful as a viewer watching it.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Real quickly, I'd love to know how you mentioned that you had done a lot of research and seen a lot of different performers. And as you mentioned, there are 12 performers that are kind of featured in this film. How did you narrow down? How on earth, with all of the hundreds of amazing performers, even like dozens and dozens just in Portland alone, how did you kind of narrow down to that 12?
Well, I had to educate myself, so we went to as many shows as possible. And, once you start going to your second and third and fourth show of a troupe, there are certain people that stand out and certain people that don't stand out as much. Nothing wrong with them. Very enjoyable. Great part of a variety show any Friday night. But there are certain ones that rise above that. Zora is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So is Isaiah. These people, when Isaiah comes out, there's not 7 Isaiahs there doing a show. He's doing a show with, several other people at any given time. And when Isaiah comes out on the stage, you stop what you're doing and your jaw goes down. These are the kind of people that when they perform, people stop talking and they notice them. I don't know, star quality. I don't know about that word, but they have a quality that they take their art so seriously, and they are reflecting back that beauty and that art into the room. And in that moment, that if you're tuned into that at all, you fucking stop what you're doing. Well, after you go to enough, you realize those people and they stand out. So that became the beginning point of Angelique, we have to interview her, or Zora, we have to interview her. And, some people, when you interview them, they're not great. They're not great necessarily at an interview. Maybe maybe they're a little fearful, which is certainly natural. Maybe they can't get their ideas out, which is also natural. Maybe they're, whatever. They just don't want to be on camera more so than they are on stage. And so we pre-interviewed every person that we wanted to interview. But then you just kind of go for it, and you set up an interview and you hope the best for it. And I would like to think that we kind of created a safe place for people to talk about things that aren't just, why I perform, but things about their lives that make it difficult to perform, or things that they're overcoming. Well, that's interesting on a human level. So I think that helps give the film a soul.
Absolutely. Because one of the things I love about that cast, those dozen people, is that there's, first of all, I love that you included some Burlesque performers, as well as Russell, more of the MC style, and lots of different styles, classic and neo, and all of these things. One thing that I felt watching that was slightly missing a little bit was maybe a diversity in size. And I kind of have a 2-part for that one. Zora, I'm curious to know whether that's something, as you are a performer and producer, is that something that you kind of incorporate as part of your burlesque mission or anything like that? And then on the flip side, as far as with this film, was it something that you considered or a conscious decision made as far as what to include, especially on the feminine side, as far as including different sizes, different shapes, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. Very, very excited about the opportunity to speak to that.
Good.
Specifically for the documentary, I think what it primarily had to do with the people who we found interesting that were geographically accessible to us. And that is absolutely not to say that there was no body diversity that was interesting, that was geographically accessible. These people that show up in the documentary happen to be the people that made the final cut. And there is, unfortunately, in Portland, we are a bit plagued with a lack of diversity. I would say that the Portland burlesque industry is awesomely non-reflective of what actually is a larger snapshot of the city in general. I feel like we have a very diverse community in terms of body difference, body size, gender identification, race, all of those things. But I think that we have per capita within the burlesque industry a lot more of that than per capita Portland in general, if that makes sense. So the opportunity there, yes, it was absolutely considered. And yes, it was something that we kept in mind. I will be authentic and say that it wasn't necessarily something that we sought out to have a plant by any means, because I don't think that would have been authentic. And I don't think it would have been true to the story of the film of like, oh, let's just make sure that we're checking all the diversity boxes.
Absolutely.
But a lot of it came down to, again, and said, I don't know if there's any diplomatic way to hand off a grenade, but it was who we found interesting at the time that we had geographic access to. Yeah. And that also means it was people that we had access to in these shows. So I want to be very delicate in saying this, because I in no way blame shifting, but we only have access to bodies that are being put on stage as producers and as people who are going to observe these film or these shows to find out who we want to put in the film. And so without being able to go to shows that represent to a good enough degree that you have choice and that you have selection of any category, those people already have to be on stage. Those and when I say those people, I mean any people. I mean anybody of any category has to be creating an act, creating new content, being interesting enough that they're going to get themselves in front of a producer, being all of the things that you need to be in order for a producer to book you. And then also the happenstance of them being at a show that we happened to see and went, oh, aha, there it is. So if that kind of is that feels kind of like a good umbrella answer for essentially what we're looking for, because that also, I think, again, when we talk about per capita, it also can speak to a larger systemic issue, where is there a discrimination against one while there is a preference towards another. And I believe that probably in the last 5 years specifically, maybe even kind of like microscopically in the last 3 years, we have seen a lot of that completely obliterated, because there aren't just pretty burlesque shows anymore. And again, I want everybody to hear that the right way. Like, I want to just be able to speak very candidly. A lot of burlesque shows are just pretty burlesque shows. And we now have political only. We have like race specific. We have gender fluidity specific. We have cause or charity specific burlesque shows now that are happening, that are giving so much more audience traction to marginalized individuals and to marginalized groups. And because of that sort of influx, right, I would say, of that conversation happening on a national scale, and then obviously it will trickle down into the burlesque community. I also have seen our burlesque industry be awesomely responsible and accountable to showing up for this conversation and creating that diversity internally, and then kind of forcing it outward as well. Again, I answer this question very sensitively, because I know that it will be something that I will reflect back on in 10 months and be like, fuck, why didn't you think of that? Because this is sort of the mindset I'm in right now. But I guess I would say that I feel like that sort of briefly touches upon each aspect. And the fact that this film started in 2009, when they're, at least in Portland specific, there wasn't a whole ton. I mean, there were shows happening, but there was not even close to the diversity of show content, platform, and theme that is happening now, that gave us access. And for myself personally as a producer, I'm strictly on talent. If you have the talent, I do not give a shit what is between your legs, what's between your ears, what you look like when you walk around every day, or how it is that you choose to mobilize yourself. I do not give a fuck. If you show up on stage and you own your shit, you're going to be in my show. And like that for me is basically how I run my shows. And yes, like I tend to curate my shows very specifically. Like I often will pick people or pick numbers that I know will greet the caliber of show that I'm trying to curate with my own troupe, and that oftentimes is how things get done. But also, you reach out to people and you book them and they're not available. And you reach out to them again and they're not available again. And so these are all things that kind of happen in the mix to switch from, what goes into a documentary versus what would go into a show, like a monthly show or a quarterly show or an annual show. But, these are all some of the challenges that we face. But I am so proud to say that there are increasingly more and more shows that are category specific and category inclusive. And by that, I mean, I love that there are shows that are queer and gender fluid only, and that I, as a cis female, I'm not allowed to be in that show. And I am so happy that that exists, because I already have tons of platform, and I'm ready to sit down and make way for other people who don't have a platform, who don't have a voice. And so I guess, I mean, obviously this is it's a very sensitive topic, and it's a very hot topic. I don't mean hot as in sexy. I mean hot as in temperatures rise, and blood boils. But that would be how I answer that question. And again, to circle back, a lot of it is what we had access to based on what was being put on stage at the time. And, and the availability of a diversity of people that were exhibiting the specific characteristics that we were looking for this film. And a lot of that had, 40% talent and 60% personality. Because as you saw, we're having to sit down and engage and interact. And that does require the comfort with oneself to sit down and talk in such a way, and all these other things. And as John mentioned, there are some really phenomenal performers whose interviews didn't make it in, and it wasn't because they said anything wrong or did anything wrong. It just, at the very end, it didn't fit into the fiber of where the documentary was going.
Well said.
Very well said. Let me put in 2 seconds of my take on it. Mostly, I think that Zora covered everything, but I'll just say from my perspective, right or wrong, the director gets to choose. So the director is going to get the arrows either way. It doesn't make it right, but I did never go out to look for any certain size of a person.
Mm-hmm.
What I did go look for was, this cannot be about 12 white women.
True.
Clearly, it appears from the outside that there's a whole boylesque part of this, and clearly there are people of color around this. Well, in a world where it is diverse, and I think we should also put our arms around diversity, that's just my personal thing, I felt like, well, the film had to be made up of that soup. And just to interject someone of a larger size than any of our people didn't seem the right thing. Had anybody that I did see come up to the level of the people that I feel that I did pick, and that I like I said before, did fucking blow me away, they would be in the movie. Doesn't mean that they're bad. Doesn't mean that they're not good or anything like that. And some people will like the people I chose. Some people may not, and wish that I had chosen other people. So
Well, I mean, it comes back to what we were saying earlier, where this is a snapshot, not only in time, but of the industry. And again, very much appreciated that you got, a lot of the diversity in there. As someone who, like, for me, like, I don't quite identify as plus size, but I'm also not like super skinny. I'm in that weird kind of in between. And so it was a little, like, for me watching, I was like, oh man, I wish there was someone that I could, identify with size wise in it. But at the same time, I like what you said, Zora. And this is not, again, it's not blame shifting.
Sure.
But we have a responsibility to be the kind of, to get out there and to be putting in new acts and to be out there. Producers have a responsibility to book people who are good and putting themselves out there and all that. Directors have a responsibility to, when they see those kind of things, to do that. And it's just like there's responsibility all around is what I'm trying to say, to be as inclusive as we can in all those different ways.
Yeah. Accountability across the board, I think, is important. And again, I think it's so important to highlight that, again, we started the process in 2009 and this conversation wasn't even happening. And it can be hard to remember that because this conversation has been happening now so actively and so awesomely aggressively for the last, year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, that it's hard to remember a time where any of us were that ignorant. But we all were. It takes that moment of being woke.
Things change.
It really does. And so again, like, and also I think that there's been a lot of traction gained. It's kind of a two-way street of like, I would never go on stage and take my clothes off because of the way I look. Oh, now I'm understanding, like, there's an audience for that. And guess what? I'm totally fucking okay with the way that I look, and I'm going to get on stage. And if you don't like it, then there's the fucking door.
Hell yeah.
And so, like, I think that because of the conversation, it shifts the confidence of everyone involved. And yeah, I guess we could probably leave it there because we could spend all day on this one.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's a great point, though, because, like, the times do change. And when I think about myself 6, 7, 8 years ago, I was not performing then, because there's no way I would have gotten on stage, and done that. So that's a good point as well. Now, I am curious because, we touched on this earlier, and there's actually one quote, I believe it was one of the stage door Johnnies who said it in the movie, in the film, about how he was talking about masculinity, and he said it's about exploring masculinity, not defining it. And that really stuck out to me because it's not just about masculinity, and to me that can be applicable to femininity, to humanity, and to burlesque in general. So I'm curious to know, without needing to define it, when someone asks each of you what burlesque is, whether they're a burly virgin or it's someone that, is trying to get into your inner soul, how do you kind of sum up burlesque?
Well, Zora, you should take the first stab at this. I will tell you, there are people that watch the film and also still go, but what is burlesque?
Right. Exactly.
Part of what's interesting is that it can kind of be almost anything.
Oh, fuck. This is like the thing that all of us have been like actively avoiding, like putting our finger down on with the documentary. It's like whack-a-mole. It's like, how many ways can we like undo the definition that we just gave you so that you're still questioning? I would define burlesque for myself as an amplification of joy and personality and total adoration of expression.
Ooh, I got some chills.
And with that, 100% control of the energetic field that exists around you physically. When I am performing and when I am on stage, what burlesque gives me that I get to take back to my regular life, which I think is part of what's really important for me, is a really brilliant reminder that I'm in control. I am 100% in control of my body environment. I am 100% in control of the energy that I channel out towards the audience. And I am 100% in control of the energy that comes back to me. And there are very few pie wedges, so to speak, in people's lives where they get to have that kind of control. And by that, I mean, yes, we quote, choose to get up and go to work every day and spend however long in the car. And, yes, we, choose to come home and, make dinner for a family or what have you. But where you choose from, I think, is something we don't think about a lot. Are you choosing from obligation? Are you choosing from responsibility? Are you choosing from joy? Are you choosing from a declaration that you've made about how you want to be in this life and how you want to show up? And burlesque is an energetic arena where I get to show up and be 100% of myself, 100% choosing from joy and choosing from conviction and not choosing from anything else. There is no duty. There is no obligation. There is no, choosing from a place of, I guess I would say, responsibility there. It is 100% because I want to be there. And with that, everything that I touch and everything that comes out of me is a product of that intention. And it is very challenging because it is cavernous when that self shows up and really asks you to dance. And I don't know that I have the stamina or the mental capacity to practice that 100% of the time. I can tell you right now that I'm actively not practicing that 100% of the time. I'm practicing it in the arena of burlesque only, but I'm getting better and more diligent at practicing it in a much more consistent and sustained way. And to me, that's what burlesque is. It is the beautiful and unapologetic arrival to the self and agreement with the universe to show up and be vulnerable and to be yourself and to be exposed and to have that moment of trust when you step off of your fear ledge that you are going to be received. And that is by producers and by audiences, but most importantly by yourself. You're giving yourself permission. And again, that would be something else that I will only speak for myself, but would offer that I think that very few people in this lifetime give themselves that kind of permission. And to step up to that and be available to that in your life is how I define burlesque, because that is what burlesque does for me. And nothing else in this life does that. Nothing else even comes close.
Bravo.
Yes, indeed. I love it.
Well, I wouldn't attempt any definition beyond that. That sounds fantastic. I will say one thing that is kind of just adjacent to it, because I don't know. I guess my feeling about what burlesque is the film, is all of the things in the minestrone soup. It's all those things that I present. But part of what I think is so fascinating about burlesque is that it is all of these different things, and so whether you're a burlesquer or you're just someone in the audience and you're interested, you can essentially find a troupe that is the kind of burlesque that you like. Mm-hmm. And that, it's classic, or it's all this way, or it's all political, or like you were saying, all maybe about gay men. Well, follow that burlesque. If you like that, then find that, and that becomes the burlesque that you really like. So that's part of what's interesting. There was a film that came out a couple years ago called Exposed. It's about the burlesque scene, what I would call the underground in New York City, and it's 100% political, which there's nothing wrong with that. If you enjoy that, if you enjoy being part of it, and you want to be super political on stage, or you want to go to a show that's very political, totally whatever, that's totally fine if that's what you want. If not, and you just want pretty ladies that look a certain way, you can probably find that show too. If you just want to see men of a certain color, you can probably find that show. My biggest kind of realization, let me tie this back into something else that was a huge surprise to me and fascinating, is that when I first kind of stepped into this area, I figured, oh, okay, well, Portland's kind of a unique, area, a city. I don't know how much this is going on in the rest of the country. I figured maybe, New Orleans, San Francisco, and Chicago, and New York, or something like that. Well, you guys know, but I'll just say it out loud. Actually, there's fucking burlesque everywhere. There's burlesque in Cincinnati. There's burlesque in San Antonio. I have been told there's burlesque in every state in America. So since that's true, it is every variation of that. It has become more ubiquitous, I guess, as an expression for all kinds of people. And that's really fascinating because it's not the same. If you go to Cincinnati, you go to Chicago, and you go to Portland, you're going to see different people doing different kinds of things. That's kind of part of what's interesting about it.
I agree fully. And, I think it's funny because actually my very first episode, I call it like episode 0 of this podcast,
Yes.
was basically, what is burlesque? It was a little primer. And basically the entire episode, I can sum it up for you right now. It was like, well, some people say it's this, but it's not. I don't really have a definition for you, like you can't, everybody, people who aren't familiar with it, when I tell them what I do, that I perform and that I have this podcast, they're like, oh, so what, burlesque is stripping, right? And I'm like, well, sometimes, but honestly, I've seen acts where no clothes even come off. Right. And it's still burlesque. Yeah. So yeah, I know that was a loaded question, but I appreciate those were beautiful answers. And I just love them. And I love Zora, I love going, with the feeling of it. And because I think that's something, to be brief, that's something I wish we did in life more often. Whereas instead of saying I'm a teacher, talking about the fact of imparting, knowledge onto people or changing people's lives, this or that. When I used to sell sex toys, I would at first I would be like, yeah, I sell adult toys, ha ha ha. But then I started changing it and being like, no, I help enhance relationships because that's really what I was working to do.
I help people reconnect with their sexuality.
Exactly. Beautiful. I love it. I'm going to listen to it again. I'm probably going to write it all down as like a quote. So it's all good.
Oh, you're awesome. Thank you.
Now I know, oh man, there is so much more, all of my notes and everything. There's so much I wanted to chat with you, but obviously we are already over this hour. So if it's all right, I would like to transition into just my last 2 sections. We can keep these very quick, but I do these with every single person that I interview.
Yeah.
And this first one is called Pick Your Poison, because as always, we get very deep in this podcast. We get into the nitty gritty of everything. And these questions are just a lot more superficial because we also like to know that as well. So I have 10 different ones. Obviously, we're not going to do all of them. What I'll have each of you do is just pick any number 1 through 10, and you'll get a random, very superficial, fun question about yourself. So, Zora, would you like to go first? Pick any number 1 through 10.
10.
Number 10. All right. What was the last picture you took with your phone?
My phone is right by my side. I'm going to pull it up. Let's see. Oh my God. Okay. This is a 2-part answer.
Okay.
Okay. Obviously the last picture that I took was of my cat, but
of course
the picture is awesome because, I recently got an avocado seed to sprout, and I am so excited. Grow, little avocado, grow, as it sits in the window, and it has gotten so tall literally in a week, and it has all these new leaves. And so Lila went and sat next to the avocado plant and sort of put her face in the leaves and was just gently rubbing her face on them. And it was a really precious moment. And I was actually taking photos of the avocado while Lila came up. So then it became a photo of both of them. So that is the last photo that I took.
Oh, that's
nice.
Adorable. I love it. I love good animals. Animals are just so cute. They're just so photogenic.
Yeah.
All right, John, how about you? Number 1 through 10, which one do you like?
Number 7.
Number 7.
Lucky 7.
Yeah, it's a good one. If you could spend 48 hours in the body of someone else, who would you choose and what would you do?
What?
Oh, goodness sake. Oh, my gosh. I don't know. Maybe I would be Jet d'Adore on the Dita Von Teese tour.
Oh, my gosh. I just saw them this weekend, and Jet was phenomenal. Oh, my gosh. Oh, he was everything.
Yes. And, he's so talented, and he's also, I'm sure, probably going on the ride of his life.
Oh,
so
I bet.
It's probably full of all kinds of adventure.
That's a good answer. I like it.
Thank
All
you.
right. And this very last section is called This or That. This is our quick fire round. Basically, I have a bunch of different things. They are 2 choices, and you just pick whichever one you prefer. All right. Again, real quick fire. What I'll do is I'll say each one, and then Zora, if you want to go first, and then John second. Okay.
Sure.
Sounds
ready?
Good. Go for it.
All right. Let's do it.
Yep.
Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Neither.
Fair enough.
Starbucks.
All right. City or country?
Country.
Country.
Movies or TV shows?
Movies.
Movies.
How about Dita Von Teese or Dirty Martini?
Dirty Martini.
Yeah, I'll go with Dirty Martini. Absolutely.
What about a Dirty Martini or a pint of beer?
Oh, Dirty Martini, extra dirty, extra olives every single fucking time with Hendrick's gin. You're welcome.
Yes, I'll take that.
How about day or night?
Night all the way.
Night.
Harry Potter or Star Wars?
Neither.
Oh, come on. That's all right.
You know what? I've not seen either of them, and I've not read the books, if there are books. Yep.
If there are books, yes, there are books.
There are indeed, yes.
Just not my genre whatsoever.
Fair enough. John, what about you?
Star Trek.
Okay, good. I like Star Trek. That's a good one. How about top or bottom? You can interpret these any way you like, by the way. I'm just saying. We could be talking about bunk beds,
Yeah, top all the way. Top bunk days.
Love it.
Bottom.
All right. How about mountains or ocean?
Ocean.
Classic or neo-burlesque?
Neo.
Peanut butter or jelly?
Oh, peanut butter all the time. Give me a fucking spoon right now.
Peanut butter and jelly.
Ooh, put your hands together. All right. Comedy or tragedy?
Oh, tragedy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tragedy.
What about Marvel or DC?
Ooh.
That's a good one.
Shit.
I know.
Fuck.
It's the big choices here.
Oh, God damn it. Oh, man. I'm going to let somebody down in one of these camps. I know there's no right way to answer this question. That's like
true.
So good.
It's like Sophie's Choice,
I know. I'm going to say Marvel because that's the kind of mood I'm in today.
Yeah. DC.
What about heels or bare feet? Could be on yourself, could be on somebody else. Either way.
Bare feet.
Heels.
And lastly, the ever important sleep or sex?
Oh, sleep. Sleep. Are those your pants by the door? See you later.
Sex.
All right. Love it.
That's so awesome.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Let's close this out with just a little bit of a reminder. The film is Burlesque Heart of the Glitter Tribe. If you're in LA or Portland, we have dates. What are the dates on those shows there?
Opens in Portland for 1 week starting this Friday, which is March 3rd at the Living Room Theaters, and opens the next day in Los Angeles for a week at the Montalban Theater in Hollywood. And we would love to have everybody come out and join us at any of those shows. It'll be at both of those theaters for a week. So come out and join, see the film, and talk to us on Facebook. We want to hear what you have to say.
Yes, that's perfect. So if you're listening to this, live or pretty soon after it comes out, you'll be able to catch those. If you're listening to this, in the future, you can always go to the show notes page for this episode, and I will keep it updated. If y'all can send me any new dates, and then I can keep that page updated.
Great.
You'll find that at burlesquestrippeddown.com/glittertribe. Spelled normally, GLITTERTRIBE. It's normal. So you can find all that there, along with all the links to get a hold of these folks. There's lots. I'm sure that everybody's now obsessed with you. They want to see the film. They can find it. You said on iTunes and somewhere else.
Amazon. The iTunes and Amazon as of March 7th, so a week from now.
Pretty soon. Okay. So I'll have those links in there. If it ever does come on Netflix, I'll include that in there. I'll include all the things. Don't worry.
Thank you, Velvet.
Of course. And give us a quick rundown on how the best way to get in touch with you if we want to learn more.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I unfortunately was shackled by the naming police, so I am under Zora Pavonine, but I have included my nickname directly below Zora Von Pavonine, so you can find me there. I am on Instagram as Lady Pavonine.
Perfect.
Yes, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm on Facebook. You can find me as John Manning, JONMANNING, or, of course, go to the Facebook page for Glitter Tribe. There is also a URL for Glitter Tribe, the movie, where you can see the trailer and see extra scenes and the synopsis and press, all the press that has happened over the last several months. And that's glittertribethemovie.com.
Beautiful. All right. Well, once again, I want to extend a big thank you, not only for coming on the show, but for creating such an amazing and important piece for our industry and for like we said, the burlesque adjacent, right? Folks who are interested, or the enthusiasts, or people who don't know anything about it. I think it's a wonderful film that's really important to spread and to get out there. So let's make sure that we all get out to see it. We tell all of our friends about it. And once again, thank you so much for coming on. It's been really awesome to chat with you.
Yay, thank you. I'm clapping.
Thank
Yay.
you. Woo-hoo. Thanks, Velvet.
Thank you. And there you have it, my friends. That hour flew by so quickly. And I was after we got off the Skype and I was looking at my notes, I was actually kind of disappointed, not with the way the interview went. I think it's a great interview, but just there was so much more I wanted to talk about, right? There were so many things that were touched on. I mean, like I mentioned in the interview, I was furiously taking notes the whole time I watched this film. A few little highlights I wanted to mention. I love, they talk at one point about objectification. And I don't remember if it was Babs. I think it might have been Babs or Angelique. I can't remember who said it, but they said, the difference between burlesque and stripping, for example, we are choosing to objectify ourselves on our own terms. And that burlesque emphasizes adding character to someone instead of subtracting it. I loved that. And I loved that they feature a moment where there's a big fuck up, right? And not a big fuck up, but a little fuck up in the beginning and in the beginning of a show. And it happens and they deal with that. And I really kind of connected with Zora through the screen on that one because, everybody's like trying to calm her down backstage. And she's just like, I need to just be angry for a moment. I'll get over it, but I need to just be angry. And that's totally me, 100%. But they talk about all sorts of things about how performers evolve over the years, over their careers. They talk about how burlesque kind of influences everyday life. And Zora touched on this as well. But she actually had a quote that I would love to share with you from the film. She said, "When I first started doing it, burlesque, I was taking things from my own everyday life and I was piping them into burlesque. At some point along the way, the empowerment that burlesque naturally brings started channeling back towards my real life. And I found that I was bringing confidence. Like I can pretty much do anything I want," she said. And I think that's a lot of us have experienced that. We get into, we start in burlesque by putting our experiences into burlesque, but we find very soon that it starts going the other way. I think particularly about my interview with Virginia Dare Me, and we talked about that kind of exchange as well. Two other little quotes that I took away from the film. John mentioned several times Isaiah, who is, his full name is Isaiah Esquire. And if you're not familiar with him, I highly suggest that he is just a captivating performer in the film. But he also said a couple things near the end that really, really, really hit home for me. He said, "Being able to own your sexual power is essential to being happy, to being a fully happy, fully confident, fully comfortable, safe person." And he also said, "When I'm on stage, this is my sexuality and how it connects to yours." And I thought that was a really great, talking about defining burlesque and how difficult it is. I think that those were two, I made a special note of because they really stuck out to me. So I could go on and on, but you really just need to see this film for yourself. So head over to burlesquestrippeddown.com/glittertribe. And that's going to give you the details of if you are in Portland or LA, you have a chance. If you're listening to this, fairly live, this is going live on March 4th. So yesterday and today has been the first days of those runs in Portland and LA. So you have 1 week. You got 1 week to get there. If you're listening to this in the future, I apologize that you did not get it in time. But see, if you subscribe on iTunes, then you get it delivered to your device in time. Just saying, just throwing that out there. But starting March 7th, it will be available on iTunes and Amazon. And so you'll be able to check it out there. And like I said, I will also keep in touch with John and the other filmmakers and promoters. And I will keep the show notes page updated with any other screenings that happen, any other runs around the country, or even hopefully around the world. So that'll be your home base, burlesquestrippeddown.com/glittertribe. Of course, you can also definitely follow them on Facebook, on Instagram, Zora, and all of the other, the social medias. We can all find everybody. It's not that hard. Google is our friend. So definitely seek them out and follow them. I would love to hear your feedback on this episode and on the film if you get a chance to see it. Email me velvet@burlesquestrippeddown.com. We'll be coming at you over the next few weeks. We're kind of going to get back into interviewing a lot of different burlesque performers. As I mentioned, next week I'm going to do a little special kind of a solo episode where we kind of say goodbye to the season 06. I talk about some of my biggest takeaways from it, as well as introducing our brand new posse members. And I had the distinct pleasure of, oh my gosh, pleasure doesn't even begin to cover the experience. Last weekend, I was actually up in Atlanta and I got to see Dita Von Teese in, I guess, concert or live. Oh my gosh. on stage and with Dirty Martini and Jet d'Or and like all of these people. It was amazing. And so I'm going to give you a little recap on that show next week. So be sure you tune in next week. And like I said, that you've subscribed, you share with your friends. If you'd like to support either your time or your money, your hard-earned cash, I would love it. I'll take all your money. I'll just do it. You can go to Patreon or to that Join the Posse website as well. So love you, darlings. Thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to chatting with you more next week and in the coming weeks. But until then, my friends, make sure that you stay sexy.